What's going on, everybody? Cleepus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be doing a quick comparison between the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro 5G and the Nokia G400 5G. Now before we go any further, as always, I do want to remind you to hit that subscribe button, and if you want to learn more about either phone individually, I will be linking to several other videos about them in the description, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But with that being said, let's get into it. So starting with the displays, with the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro, we're getting a 6.82-inch IPS LCD display with a resolution of 720p, a PPI of 263, and an aspect ratio of 20.5:9. With the Nokia G400 5G, we're getting a 6.58-inch 120Hz IPS LCD display with a 1080p resolution, a PPI of 401, and an aspect ratio of 20:9. So for what they are, both phones do have pretty good displays, but each phone does have an advantage over the other. With the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro at 6.82 inches versus 6.58, the Revvl 6 Pro is significantly larger, so if you're going to be on your phone a lot doing stuff like reading, for example, having a larger display is definitely going to be a good thing. In addition to this, with an aspect ratio of 20.5:9 versus 20:9, the Revvl 6 Pro has a slightly taller and more narrow form factor, so if you're doing something like watching a video in landscape mode, for example, you're going to get a more immersive experience. And if you're doing something like reading, browsing the web, using social media, stuff like that, with a taller and more narrow form factor, you can fit more content on the screen without having to scroll as much. On the other hand though, with the Nokia G400 5G, the image quality is quite a bit better. With a 1080p resolution versus only 720p, the Nokia G400 has a much sharper image, and in general, the colors and brightness look a lot better too. In addition to this, with the 120Hz refresh rate, the movement on the screen is going to be a little bit faster and smoother, and this is going to make the phone feel a little bit more premium to use. So overall, I feel like neither display is really clearly better than the other. It really depends on what you're looking for. On one hand, if you'd rather have a larger display with better dimensions, the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro will have an advantage, but if the image quality is more important to you than the display size, then of course, the Nokia G400 5G will be a better choice. Now for storage, while the Nokia G400 5G isn't bad, the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro definitely has an advantage with 128GB of internal storage versus only 64 with the Nokia G400 5G. So while again, 64GB in this price range really isn't that bad, if storage is more of a priority for you, then of course the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro, having doubled the storage of the Nokia G400 5G, is definitely going to be a much better choice. And keep in mind, both phones do have microSD card expansion too, so if you want to offload stuff like photos and videos, for example, onto a microSD card, keep in mind you can do this with either phone. For security features, both phones do have face unlock, as well as fingerprint scanners right here in the power keys, so definitely a great spot for a fingerprint scanner. But starting with the Revvl 6 Pro, let's give them a try. There we go, one more time. And there we go. And now for the Nokia G400 5G. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see there, both fingerprint scanners were real fast and responsive, no issues at all. And again, both phones do have face unlock too, so if you want to use that instead, you always can. Now for the camera setups, both phones have water drop notches for the front facing cameras, and these cameras are both 16 megapixels. Then on the back, with the Revvl 6 Pro, we got a quad camera setup with a 50 megapixel main camera, a 5 megapixel ultra wide camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. With the Nokia G400 5G, we got a triple camera setup with a 48 megapixel main camera, a 5 megapixel ultra wide camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. So in general, as far as features go, both camera setups are pretty good, but the Revvl 6 Pro does have a slight advantage, since again, this phone does have a macro camera, whereas the Nokia G400 5G, despite having an ultra wide camera, unfortunately doesn't have a macro camera. Now in my opinion, I feel like the ultra wide camera is a lot more important, and luckily the G400 5G does at least have that, but if you do want a macro camera, then the Revvl 6 Pro might be a better choice for you. And as far as quality goes, both phones do take really good photos. Sure, neither phone is going to be quite as good as a much more expensive phone, but for the average user, for the things most people are taking pictures for, like social media for example, either phone will be plenty good enough, and I don't think the quality difference is really that significant between the two. That being said, when it comes to video, keep in mind that with the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro, we do get a max quality of 2K in the rear camera and 1080p in the front, whereas with the Nokia G400 5G, this phone can only record in 1080p in both the rear and front. Now in general, I feel like being able to record in 2K isn't really that big a deal, but if you do happen to want to record in 2K, then keep in mind the Revvl 6 Pro can do this, whereas again, the Nokia G400 5G can only record in 1080p. Now when it comes to RAM and processor, with the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro, we're getting 6GB of RAM with the MediaTek Dimensity 700 processor. With the Nokia G400 5G, we're getting 4GB of RAM with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 480 5G processor. So for being more affordable 5G phones, the performance you're getting with these phones is going to be pretty good. Sure, on one hand, if you're going to be on your phone all day, or maybe you're doing demanding activities like high performance mobile gaming, in that kind of situation, these phones might feel a little slow, but in general, for more moderate use, in basic activities like web browsing, social media, streaming content like videos and music and stuff like that, either phone will get the job done perfectly fine. Between the two, you're not really going to see a huge performance difference, but in my experience, I would say in general, the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro is a tiny bit faster, but honestly, again, the performance difference between the two isn't really that big. Now I did run Geekbench Geekbench 5 benchmark tests on both phones, and here are the results I got. So again, as you can see here, there is a bit of a difference with the Revvl 6 Pro being a tiny bit faster, but again, honestly, it's not really that noticeable. So in general, again, for more basic activities, either phone is going to be perfectly fine. Now when it comes to the batteries, with the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro, we're getting a 5000 mAh battery that supports 15 watt fast charging, and the Nokia G400 5G has a 5000 mAh battery as well that supports 20 watt fast charging. So in general, as far as the overall battery specs go, they're pretty much the same. Sure, the Nokia has a slight advantage in fast charging, but honestly, it's kind of evened out because with the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro, unlike the average phone in this price range, this phone actually does have wireless charging. So honestly, when it comes to the different features, it's really going to be more or less even. And of course, with 5000 mAh batteries, both phones are going to have great battery life and longevity. So if you're in a situation where maybe you're not always around a charger, but you do still have to use your phone all day, for that kind of situation, either of these phones will be a great choice. For the software, both phones do have Android 12, which is at least good. I'm not 100% sure what the software support's like for either of these phones, but I imagine at some point in the future, both of them are probably going to at least get Android 13. But as far as I know, neither T-Mobile nor Nokia are really going to be like Samsung. So if you're after really good software support and having the latest version of Android is important to you, then you can definitely do better. But again, in general, for what they are, when it comes to the software, I don't really have any complaints. Another thing to keep in mind here is that both phones do have NFC, so if you like to make contactless mobile payments using tap and pay, then you'll be happy to know you can do that with either phone. But in conclusion, which of these phones is better? Now, this is actually pretty close because first of all, in a lot of ways, these phones are pretty much the same and their advantages are honestly pretty even too. But if you want a larger display, a slightly better camera setup, and quite a bit more storage and wireless charging too, then the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro will be a better choice for you. But on the other hand, if you prefer better image quality over just having a larger display and you want slightly better fast charging, then in that case, the Nokia G400 5G might be a better option for you. But at the end of the day, if you're looking for an entry-level 5G phone that has a good display, a good camera, decent performance, a large battery, and features like NFC, then you're really not going to go wrong with either phone. But this concludes my comparison between the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro 5G and the Nokia G400 5G. Again, if you want to learn more about either phone individually, I will be linking to several other videos about each of them in the description, as well as some information about pricing and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kleepus Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.